Welcome to Cameron's Conversations podcast. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk a bit about body composition, which feels like one of those things that is thrown about all the bloody time. And a lot of the time, people don't really have that much context about it. You probably know that you can improve your body composition by losing weight. But for a lot of people, that's kind of where the understanding stops. And actually, it's something that it really just popped into my head because I was listening to a couple of other podcasts. I think a few posts on Instagram popped up. And I kind of thought, I actually don't think this is something that's maybe abundantly clear to the average person who's maybe trying to get fitter, stronger, lose some weight, etc. Like, what are coaches actually talking about body composition, and why the hell does it matter? Right? Why are we not just talking about weight loss? So I wanted to explore that a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about body composition. So you can kind of think of your body composition as obviously part of that is going to be our skeleton, right? And that's going to take up part of what our body is made of. Water as well is another large part of your overall mass, if you like. And then we've also got things like our skeletal muscle mass, which is going to be one of the major things that I'm going to talk about in today's podcast. And then you've also got body fat, right? So we can talk about that. And really, you could talk about different types of body fat. We could always talk about the fact we have cardiac muscle as well, which is to do with like a heart and things like that as well. So there's other factors and other bits to this as well. But really in the context of what's actually important when we're talking about body composition for most people is basically the amount of body fat you have and the amount of skeletal muscle mass you have. Those two things are going to be the most relevant, right? Those are the two things that we're trying to improve on. So sometimes people are a little bit aware of these things because they have kind of jumped on the scales in their gym, usually which work through bioelectrical impedance analysis, so BIA. So that's one of the ways that people kind of come across this idea of it's not just about your weight, it's also about your body composition. Because if someone is relatively heavy, let's say they might sit at the kind of upper end of the healthy weight range or whatever it is, but they have lots of muscle mass, well, they might be really, really healthy metabolically, right? They have a good amount of muscle mass, they're very fit, they're not holding too much body fat. In the same way that someone can actually be probably within the healthy weight range and still holding a really large amount of body fat because they have really low muscle mass. So if someone's been really inactive most of their life, they've never done any resistance training, they've maybe potentially lost some muscle mass because they've been inactive. Again, sometimes just because like our jobs and things like that tend to get less active as we get older. You're walking less, moving less, picking things up and down less. All those kind of things factor in. So let's explore that a little bit. We'll explore it in these two parts. So the first bit is really obvious. One of the, I guess, quickest ways to improve your body composition is through weight loss, right? A lot of the time when people are thinking about this and getting in better shape, they're thinking, right, I need to drop weight or I need to drop fat, right? And when we're talking about dropping body fat, it can make a significant difference to our health and our body composition because having less fat mass is good for us in the long term, to a point, obviously. Like everything, there's a limit. But in general, it's hugely beneficial for us to kind of get into a healthier body fat percentage or to sort of lose a certain amount to kind of feel better, to look better, all the kind of usual stuff, right? So that is the first part of body composition. The reason that coaches talk a lot about body composition rather than just fat loss or weight loss is that there's also this second part where we want to have more skeletal muscle mass. Now, sometimes what comes up, and although this is improving, I think, because the dialogue around this is a lot better because we're talking about the importance of strength training as we get older. There's a lot more awareness of strength training into like menopause, etc., and how important that can be, especially when you consider things like osteoporosis and bone mineral density, all these kind of things. So there is a little bit more awareness of like the importance of strength training out with the way we look and all the rest of it. But there's still this kind of underlying concern sometimes about getting too bulky or building too much muscle mass. Now, as someone who's been trying to get too bulky since they were probably 17, it's not that easy. It doesn't happen by accident. A lot of the time when people are worried about getting too bulky, it's a bit like me jumping in my Fiesta and worrying about becoming Lewis Hamilton and ending up on an F1 track. It is somewhat improbable, right? It doesn't happen that easily. And actually, and when I say easily, not at all. It's not going to happen for you. I'm not going to be racing against Lewis Hamilton next week because I drive Fiesta. The same thing applies with you going to the gym 2-3 times a week. Even if it's more than that, the reality is it takes a lot of intention and a lot of effort to add a significant amount of muscle mass. So what's important about this is having more muscle mass is hugely beneficial for our health for lots of different reasons. One of those reasons, and this is kind of what when I was doing my nutrition degree many, many years ago now, and my dissertation was on, was all to do with kind of like the loss of muscle mass as we get older. And one of the things that is almost always the case is if you don't resistance train, as we get older, we lose muscle mass. Now that tends to lead to a less favorable change in our body shape, right? Because a lot of the time people do lose a little bit of muscle mass, they become less active, they feel less in shape, and if their weight is climbing up as well, it's a bit of a double whammy where you start to feel really quite out of the shape that you would like to be in, because again, you've got less muscle mass, which gives you a certain degree of kind of shape to your body, and usually in a favorable way, so more definition, etc. And as we add a little bit more body fat, that doubles down. It becomes kind of like one of these things where people feel like, oh, I'm nowhere in the shape or nowhere near the shape I was 10, 15 years ago. And it's not just fat gain, although that can be a large part of it. It can also be a bit of it can be due to muscle loss. So there is an element here of it's really helpful for health in the long term, because having more muscle mass now, whether that's your 30s, 40s, 50s or 60s, is going to, or indeed older, is going to set you up really well for the next decade and so on and so forth, right? It makes a huge, huge difference. And it's not just about vanity, right? I think this is the bit that people get wrong, is like people say, oh, I'm not really interested in getting bulky. I don't want to add loads of muscle. That's absolutely fine. But being strong and having a little bit more muscle mass is going to have a huge positive impact on you for a couple of different reasons. One, because to actually add any muscle mass, you have to strength train. And if you strength train, well, unsurprisingly, you're going to be stronger and you're going to be fitter. And again, consideration especially for women when we're thinking about bone mineral density and kind of avoiding osteoporosis and so on and so forth, these things matter, right? It matters a whole bunch that we try and navigate that well, and we have consideration to that as we get older. We don't want to lose bone mineral density. That's how we end up with fractures and breaks more easily as you get older. But also, when it comes to things like type 2 diabetes, it reduces the likelihood of you developing it. So having more muscle mass is somewhat preventative. It's got a limited effect because you can only build so much muscle so easily. But at the same time, it is hugely beneficial, and it increases insulin sensitivity because it's sort of more uptake of, if you like, glucose from your bloodstream into your muscles, which basically, if you like, blood sugar into your muscles. So it's also really good in that sense too. So it has a bit of a preventative effect, and it can help you regulate these things. So there's loads of other impacts too, but it's okay to not want to get super bulky, but almost everyone should want to build a bit of muscle. The reality is you're not going to pile loads on. You don't look like a bodybuilder by accident. And I think it's one of these things that always makes me smile when people do say, like, I'm really, really worried about getting bulky. And it's like, it's really not that easy. There's a reason bodybuilders like train like 5-6 times a week and are eating a colossal amount of calories and train so bloody hard, and often train for a very extended period. You know, they're training an hour and a half. It's not accidental. In the same way that it always makes me smile, because I can think of a great conversation I had with a client where they said to me, and it was many, many years ago now, and they were speaking about something, they're talking about the Olympics, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd never want to get as bulky as that, blah, blah, blah. And it always makes me smile, because I was thinking about that, because people genuinely worry about that being the case, where they're going to get that bulky. And it's like, that person, you know, the Olympic cycle's 4 years long, right? They've probably trained for 10, 12 years at that point. They're training probably twice a day. And sometimes people get in their own head like, oh, I wouldn't want to like look like that, or I'm going to look like that if I weight train. It's absolutely not the case. I can't emphasize that enough. Anyway, I've kind of labored that point a little bit more than I intended to, but just to stress, like, it's not that easy. It's probably just my bias and my own personal experience of like, I've absolutely built muscle. I'm so much stronger than I used to be. But this idea of getting too bulky, like, yeah, sadly not that easy. Been trying for a long time. But the point is that it's really beneficial for your health. And it makes a lot of sense, because not only is it beneficial for your health in the long term, not only is it going to have a sort of beneficial effect for things like prevention of type 2 diabetes, it's going to allow you to move better and feel stronger as you get older. It's going to allow you to stay in better shape too. And that's the bit I really want to touch on. So let's speak a little bit about that. So I've obviously talked about that body fat piece initially. Now, unsurprisingly, for most people, if we've got body fat to lose, when we lose body fat, we look better for it. That's just one of those things, right? It's pretty obvious. And I know, dropped 20 kilos, felt a lot better for it. But over the time that I dropped 20 kilos, I also trained really, really hard too. Sort of 3 times a week at that point is what I was training. And I made a bunch of progress and got much stronger, which meant that I had a little, or hopefully would mean that I have a little bit more muscle mass at the end of that weight loss phase than when I started, because it's not easy to add a lot of muscle whilst we're losing weight. That's something that's really important to know. At some point, and this is the case for most people, it's useful to have a period at maintenance or a period in a small surplus, depending on what your goals are, how much muscle you want to build, how much stronger you want to get. But it's really useful to focus on that being the priority, is getting as strong in the gym as possible or getting strong at training at home as possible, and not just focusing on weight loss, because there is a limit to how much muscle you can gain in a weight loss phase. Although if you are new to training or relatively new, or your training wasn't very structured and intentional before, you can absolutely gain muscle whilst you lose weight. And the great thing about that is, if you imagine that the weight loss is doing 90% of the work, there's also still this added 10% bonus of you getting into better shape because you're training too. So the weight losses, especially when it's about changing your body shape, is going to massively outweigh it in the short term, because you can lose weight much faster than you can build muscle. But the big difference is, with building muscle and getting in better shape, is that it can occur over a much longer time period. So let's say someone diets for 6 months, they're kind of done with their weight loss phase, they're feeling much, much better, they're much, much leaner, they like how they look much more. If they want to continue to improve the way they look and feel fitter and stronger and more comfortable in their body and feel like they have more definition, weight loss isn't the answer for them anymore. It's adding a little bit more muscle mass. And the great thing is that when you lose weight, and especially, as I've mentioned, if with consideration to you're maybe a little bit newer to training, or your training's been a bit inconsistent before, or you've not maybe made a lot of progress, you go to the gym, but you're not necessarily pushing yourself forward and lifting more weight or doing more reps every single week. The reality is that you can gain a good bit of muscle in a weight loss phase. And that means by doing some resistance training, some strength training during a weight loss phase, you actually look better earlier in the process than someone who is just going to lose weight. And I have had quite a few clients in recent years particularly come to me who've lost a lot of weight, and they feel a lot better in a lot of ways, but still aren't really as happy as they'd like to be, because they've just not got that much muscle mass. So they don't feel like they've got a lot of definition. And that's where they kind of want to say, actually, I'd like to get into the strength training thing, and I want to get in better shape, not just lose weight, because I've done that and I'm much happier than I was, but I feel like I've kind of reached the ceiling. Like, I don't want to keep losing weight. I feel like I'm going to look too thin, but equally, I'm still not quite happy with where I'm at. Happier than I was, sure, but there's still some kind of room for progress in terms of where they want to get. So this is where this idea of body composition becomes really important, is for them, weight loss isn't the answer anymore. It's actually building a little bit more muscle. And not only is that really, really helpful, because it can give you new focus, because a lot of people do lose focus at the end of a weight loss phase. They kind of smash the weight loss phase, get to the weight they aimed for, feel really good, and then the focus completely goes. Their nutrition starts to fall to bits, and they aren't focusing on the training, and they kind of just are in that weird grey area of not having a direction, right? They're, okay, I'm there that now. Like, maintenance isn't very sexy or exciting for some people, and they lose that focus. Whereas sometimes actually having a focus of, okay, I really want to get much stronger in the gym, and I want to get much fitter, and I maybe set some goals outside of the gym to do with fitness. These things are really, really helpful, because they allow you to kick on. And over the course of 6 months, 9 months, a year, because you're focused on getting stronger in the gym, you look even better, considerably better, because you're building a bit more muscle mass as well. And this is why coaches talk about it so much, is that losing weight will absolutely, for most people who have weight to lose, of course, make them look much better and feel much better. Like, they're gonna feel more comfortable in their own skin, and that's bloody brilliant. But there is a piece here where if you also strength train, you tend to see that change quicker, and the end position you get to is even better, because most of us, yes, want to lose weight, but it's not really about a goal weight. It's really, although people can set that because it gives them a direction to go in, what's really about is a certain kind of look, right? They want to kind of look like they exercise. They want to look toned, quote unquote, if that's a word you want to use, or they want to look like they exercise, and they kind of want to have a good amount of definition. All these things are a major factor, right? A major, major factor. That is what we're looking to get to in terms of the change we're looking to see. We're trying to get into really good shape, so our clothes fit brilliantly and we feel really comfortable and all the rest of it. That's what we're looking for. So that part of it does also come from this muscle gain piece, this idea of actually we want to have more skeletal muscle mass. And as I said, it has a huge knock-on effect to health. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that topic and cover off, like, well, why does body composition matters? Well, this is why it matters, is because in the long term, you're going to be in much better shape. And a little example for you is this, is the first time I was 80 kilos, I was not at all happy with the way I looked, right? So I had kind of looked to gain some muscle, so I'd kind of allowed my weight to creep up, and then I also lost a little bit of focus and I gained a bit much kind of body fat. So I ended up just kind of being in this position where I just wasn't feeling great. I was 80 kilos quite a few months ago now, because I've been in a muscle gain phase where I've exceeded that. And at 80 kilos, I had a bit of a compare from the photos the first time I was 80 kilos to, if you like, the second time I was 80 kilos. And the difference is massive. In t-shirts, when I was first 80 kilos, I looked like I had a fair bit of weight to lose. Now, when I'm sitting at 80 kilos, like in a photo with a sort of t-shirt on, etc., I feel pretty damn good. I'm maybe not as lean as I would like to be. It's probably not my quote-unquote ideal body composition, but there is a huge difference, because likely as not, I have 3, 4, maybe 5 kilos more, if I'm optimistic, more kilos of muscle mass on my frame than I used to, which now means that I can sit at a heavier body weight, but look in shape and look good and not have to be so lean. And this brings me to kind of final point as well, is there are definitely clients I have worked with where we have got them to a point where they have been really, really lean, they're feeling really, really good about their body composition, but sustaining that weight is going to be a lot more effort than we perhaps like. We've then gone into a bit of a muscle gain phase, so very slowly and steadily, added a little bit, got much stronger, got much fitter, and 6 months, 9 months, a year on, because muscle gain does take much longer than fat loss, they've then sat at a similar weight, or a couple of kilos heavier, and been like, oh my goodness, what a bloody difference. Like, I feel like I look completely different to how I did before at the same weight. That is the big advantage of the training piece of all this, is that there's loads of benefits of strength training, but one of them is that you can be in better shape at the same or even a heavier body weight than you often were before. It's not something that if I was to look when I'm 75 kilos, which for me would be really quite lean, like if I was to get 75 kilos again, which I'm planning to do over the next couple of months, when I'm there, I will no doubt look significantly better than I did at 75 kilos 3 years ago, for example. Like, I can tell there's quite a difference in my body shape since then. So I think that's quite a cool way of looking at it too, is you can win by losing weight, sure, but if you want to really win in the long term, to make it even more sustainable, to get in even better shape without it in any way feeling like it's extreme or really restrictive, where you have to diet yourself to be extremely lean, you can actually just build a bit more muscle and you'll be in a much better position. So that's a nice kind of roundup, I think, or hopefully it has been, of why body composition matters and why it's worth thinking about, and rather than just thinking about fat loss. The other kind of like very final piece, because I said final piece before, to this is, I think it's also a healthier place to be, where we don't just focus solely on weight loss. It can be absolutely your primary goal, but I think for most people, understanding that your body isn't just something that looks a certain way, but is also something that moves a certain way, that can perform a certain way, is really empowering. I know for a lot of clients I work with in one-to-one coaching that for them, this, I feel much stronger, I'm really proud of how strong I feel, like that kind of dialogue is really empowering and gives them, I guess, in the long term, much better kind of relationship with their body image, etc. Because it's not just about the way they look. Obviously, they look better and they get into better shape, and that helps. But it's also this thing of like, their body's something that can perform, and they can pick up heavy weights. They feel like they move well, they feel strong, they feel fit. That's a really important and bloody good feeling too. So if you also want to change your body composition, if that's a focus for you, you just want to lose weight right now, but you're now thinking, maybe I do need to add a little bit more muscle and kind of take the strength training thing a bit more seriously, then in the show notes, there is going to be the link for one-to-one coaching. So if you want to have a chat, find out a little bit more about how it all works, just click onto that and we'll take it from there. But otherwise, have a great week and I'll speak to you soon.